Thought that in honor of Halloween, I would tell you the story of Toronto's most famous haunted building. This is the story of the haunted lighthouse on Centre Island. Now, the Gibraltar Point Lighthouse is Toronto's oldest public building that's still standing on its original foundations. It was built in 1805, and it was probably the only public building that survived the burning of York in 1813 during the War of 1812. The thing's built with walls that are about 3 feet thick of stone, so have fun burning that. Now, our story begins shortly after the war, in the year of 1815. The Sheriff of Toronto, a man by the name of Peter Jarvis, and if you know Jarvis Street, he was a member of that family. He was informed there's a problem out in the harbor, the light on the lighthouse in Gibraltar Point not been lit for several weeks, and so he rode out to investigate. Now, the lighthouse is now on the Toronto Islands, but at the time it was part of the Toronto Peninsula. So Jarvis just rode around and looped out towards the end. And so at the western tip of the peninsula, where the lighthouse was, he went to the lighthouse keeper's cottage and he went inside. And what he saw there was to haunt him for the rest of his life, because what he found inside there was nothing. Everything was in perfect order. The house is clean and put away as it should be. The dishes were washed and the clothes were folded. The only thing wrong was there was no trace of the lighthouse keeper, a man by the name of Mr. Radelmuller. And, as it turned out, there never would be again. That's the known facts of the case. Or the more common version of the story, let's say. But here the story takes a little turn for the macabre. At the time, there were several villages on the peninsula, mostly fishermen, fishing villages, and that sort of thing. And in these little small villages, tongues wagged, and stories began to be shared around. And so, this was the story that came out from them in this period. It turns out Mr. Radelmuller wasn't just the lighthouse keeper, and he had a little secret. He was also a bootlegger. Now, at the time, there was, in addition to the villages, there was also a blockhouse with a small garrison of British soldiers on the northern tip of the island, near where Billy Bishop Airport is today. And so, not surprisingly, Mr. Radelmuller's most frequent customers were actually the soldiers. And so one night in January, some soldiers made their way from the blockhouse to the lighthouse, and to purchase some, ill-gotten liquor. So they met, some money changed hands, and the soldiers made their way back to the blockhouse with a small barrel of booze. But when they got back to the blockhouse on this cold January night and opened up their keg, they discovered that the keg was mostly frozen. And since alcohol doesn't really freeze, that meant they just paid no small sum for a small keg of mostly water. They headed back to Mr. Radelmuller to have a chat. When they confronted Mr. Radelmuller at his cottage, he very unwisely refused to refund them their money. And so the talk got violent, and they went to attack him. Mr. Radelmuller tried to escape to the lighthouse and his very thick stone walls, but the soldiers pushed their way in. Before he could barricade the main door, he made a run up the stairs. They caught him on the stairwell, and they murdered him. Now, once their blood began to cool, their soldiers were faced with a rather difficult little problem. What do they do now? So after some consultation amongst the two of them, they decided that they would take the logical course and chop Mr. Radelmuller's body up with his firewood axe, and then just cast the pieces all hither and thither and let the matter rest there. And so it went. Such is the legend of the lighthouse keeper and how he vanished with nary a trace in 1815. History has shed a little light on the story. The records indicate that 2 British soldiers, one by the name of John Henry and the other John Blumen of the Glengarry Light Infantry, were charged with the murder of Radelmuller, but acquitted due to a lack of evidence. Other men followed in Radelmuller's footsteps, as keeping the lighthouse, keeping its lights on, lit, well into the second half of the 20th century. The son of the 4th lighthouse keeper, who would in time himself become a lighthouse keeper, claimed to have found an unmarked grave a few hundred yards from the lighthouse. It was thought the bones in the grave may have been Radelmuller's, but there was no way of knowing. A skull was also found on the island and was also thought to have been Radelmuller's. And it was taken to the Royal Ontario Museum, where it disappeared. The lighthouse still stands, though it is no longer used. The keeper's cottage is long since gone. But there are a few things lingering even today to this little story. Every now and then, lights are seen going up and down the stairs of the lighthouse, even though the door is solidly locked and the walls are so very thick. And even more disturbing than the lights is what is sometimes found inside the lighthouse itself. For every now and then, the last time was in the 1980s, so it's been a while, but every now and then the caretakers of the property find something on the 8th step of the stairs in the lighthouse. Blood. It is always the same step, it's always the same type, and those who find it always remember the name of Radelmuller and the legend of his grisly end. Happy Halloween.